In my last video, there was a comment stating that I should look into Job a little bit more. I might have missed something. And to be honest, looking back, I was kind of a jerk about it. So I kept tossing and turning at night, thinking, did I miss something? Given that Job is a fundamental book of the Tanakh, Old Testament, whatever you want to call it, I decided it is worth a revisit because my original point was that it's the most Jewish book in the Tanakh because the lesson is just keep taking a beating from God until he says it's enough. It's worth it. Let's look into suffering. Let's look how the Bible explains it and see if we can uncover more truth to it than that. In this video, we're just gonna go through the story of Job, let it unfold as if you are reading it yourself. Let me guide you, starting with Job 1:1. There was a man in the land of Uz named Job. That man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. His possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and a very large household. Job was wealthier than anyone in the East. You may be wondering, where is Uz? Well, we know it's in the East. Well, relative to biblical times, that means it would probably be in the land of Edom or northern Arabia. So yes, that does mean Job was not an Israelite, yet he worshipped the God of Israel. How devout was Job? Well, shortly after it's described, when a round of feast days was over, Job, rising early in the morning, would make burnt offerings, one for each of his kids, for Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned and blasphemed God in their thoughts. This man was so afraid of God that he would make sacrifices in preparation in case one of his kids even sinned. One day, the divine beings presented themselves before the Lord, and the adversary came along with them. If you were raised on Sunday school literature, you may be wondering, who is the adversary? There's supposed to be Satan in the Bible. And you're right. However, Satan didn't show up for hundreds of years later after influence from other cultures. Early in the Jewish tradition and the Jews at the time of Jesus, they would have known this as the adversary. There was no concept of hell and Satan yet. That was invented later in the mythology. They believed in a place called Sheol, which was kind of like a purgatory. And their version of Shaitan, as it's called, Satan, the adversary, is actually in heaven with God. Why would Satan be up there talking to God with the council of beings? The adversary is just meant to be a devil's advocate, someone who tests the faith of the subjects of God. So no, Job does not have Satan. It never originally had Satan. That was co-opted later. The Lord said to the adversary, "Have you noticed my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil." The adversary responds, "Why, it is you who have fenced him round. Him and his household and all that he has, you have blessed his efforts." Adversary makes a good point. Much like rich kids who get Jesus tattoos, who wouldn't think they're being blessed, especially if you're the richest guy in all the East. Dude's got thousands and thousands of livestock, 10 children. Dude's doing pretty well. The Lord replied to the adversary, "See, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on him." God's just saying, don't kill him. So here is the adversary's work. In Job 1:15, he loses all of his oxen and some servants in a raid by the Sabians. In 1:16, Job loses all of his sheep and some servants to God's fire from heaven. They say that fire opened up from the heaven and God's fire literally just burned up sheep and servants. Job 1:17, Job loses all of his camels and some servants in a raid by the Chaldeans. And then in 1:19, Job loses all of his children to a collapsed house. I guess you don't lay a hand on Job, but you can kill his kids and that's a lot of lives right there already taken out of the picture to prove a point. Job responds naturally and arose, tore off his robe, cut off his hair, and threw himself on the ground and worshipped. Maybe there's something behind Job after all. After all of that pain and suffering, he still is dedicated to the Lord. I mean, losing a lot of sheep's heartbreaking and, kids too, but this next verse is the most insane verse in this entire book. Job 2:3, the Lord said to the adversary, "He still keeps his integrity, so you have incited me against him to destroy him for no good reason." Don't let Job hear that. He's out there worshiping you after he took out his kids and stuff, and you're saying, the Lord is saying to the adversary, "You incited me for no good reason. The omnipotent God can tell that it wasn't a good reason he was incited. The adversary answered the Lord, "Skin for skin. All that a man has he will give up for his life. But lay a hand on his bones and his flesh, and he will surely blaspheme you to your face." Essentially saying, let me touch him. Let me put my hands on him. Make his body sick and stuff. That when you kill kids and camels and stuff, it's not sending a message. Let me touch him. The Lord said to the adversary, "See, he is in your power. Only spare his life. Don't kill him." The adversary departed from the presence of the Lord and inflicted a severe inflammation on Job. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, gets blown up like a blimp. Job 2:9. His wife said to him, "You still keep your integrity, blaspheme God and die." Essentially going, I don't know what you did, but you pissed off. You should die. Our kids are gone. Our livestock's gone. Like whatever you did, you shouldn't be living right now. That's what God's telling you. Next, we see what happens when Job's friends see him. When they saw him from a distance, they could not recognize him, and they broke into loud weeping. Each one tore his robe and threw dust in the air onto his head. A little dramatic, all right? They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights. None spoke a word to him, for they saw how great his suffering was. Wow. Job's friends are a little more ride or die than his wife was, that's for sure. Now here is where Job breaks, starting in chapter 3. Afterward, Job began to speak and curse the day of his birth. If you learn the book of Job from Sunday school or something, you probably don't remember that it's a really long book, and the first 2 chapters and the last chapter, pretty much all the story, from Job 3:2 to 42:6, it is just poetry. A lot of sad poetry about why would God do this to me? For good reason? No, it wasn't. I'm not going to go over all the poetry, but we can hit the highlights. We can hit the highlights here. Here's some good ones. Job 3:11. Why did I not die at birth? Expire as I came forth from the womb. Job 6:4. For the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit absorbs their poison. God's terrors are arrayed against me. Job 7:2, like a slave who longs for the evening, like an heirling who waits for his wage. Job 10:1, I am disgusted with life. I will give rein to my complaint, speak in the bitterness of my soul. Job 12:25, they grope without light in the darkness. He makes them wander as if drunk. Here's a great one if you're a metal band. Here's some bars you can steal. Job 24:20, may the womb forget him. May he be sweet to the worms. May he be no longer remembered. And here's my personal favorite of the poetry section, a place where I think Job actually identifies what is going on. Job 16:12, I had been untroubled, and he broke me in pieces. He took me by the scruff and shattered me. He set me up as his target. And I feel at this point, Job is a little targeted. I mean, to go back to Job 2:3, God says he was incited for no good reason. To prove what? A point to his coworker? Kids are dead, man. Don't worry. God's going to fix this, right? At the end of the poetry section, the Lord comes down and tells Job exactly what his lesson is to clarify any sort of confusion. Lord replied to Job out of tempest and said, who is this who darkens counsel, speaking without knowledge? Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions or who measured it with a line? I had heard you with my ears, but now I see you with my eyes. Therefore I recant and relent, being but dust and ashes. Jesus Christ, God. God's pissed at Job. He's saying, where were you when I made the whole ass universe to question ask me? Worm, bitch, worm. And so Job just gets annihilated for like 4 chapters there. Repents to God going, I don't know. I'm sorry that I didn't do nothing and then got my whole life destroyed. You're right. I'm sorry for that. We break the poetry by Lord going to Job's friends. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz, I'm not going to pronounce any of his friends' names, right? I'm sorry. I am incensed at you and your 2 friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job. So God's pissed at them too. It's like one of those days where your boss is pissed off, emotionally unstable, and just everyone's going to get it no matter what. Pretty much what he's saying here is that you were saying that Job sinned, even that though he didn't, like you understood God's actions. Whereas God himself said, Job 2:3, you incited me for no good reason, but whatever. Now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves and let Job, my servant, pray for you. For to him I will show favor and not treat you vilely. God in Job is actually on one here. Not only is he pissed at Job for doing nothing, not only is he pissed at his friends for saying that Job probably did something, he's also requiring sacrifices. You have got to satisfy his bloodlust so he can come down from this, I don't know, like rage boner he's on right now. Just so we don't miss any context, really quickly, I'll go over Job's friends and what they had to say about him, because we don't have time to go through all the poetry. In Job 4, you have Eliphaz say, "Just think, who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." Inequity just means immoral behavior. So Eliphaz is assuming God's always right. Don't question the greater plan. Obviously, there's a meaning to this. It's not going to be for no good reason. In Job 8, Bildad says, "Does God pervert judgment, or does the Almighty pervert justice? If your children sinned against him, he has delivered them into the power of their transgression." Implying, hey, Job, yeah, you shouldn't question God. And if your kids died, well, that was their fate. They deserved it or some shit. I don't know. And then in Job 11, so far, it says, "If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and not let wickedness dwell in your tents. Surely then you will lift up your face. Without blemish you will be secure and will not fear." Telling Job all this boils and inflammation will go away if you just apologize for whatever sin you obviously committed, because you did something to get all this. And I'm tired of seeing that in the monotheistic faiths, where they see someone disabled or hurt and they go, well, you sinned, so you deserve it. It's a very weird way to look at individuals. But don't worry, the story has a happy ending. The Lord restored Job's fortunes when he prayed on behalf of his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice what he had before. Great. He was only the richest guy. So the richest guy just got richer. That's what we're happening. And then here's the end. Okay, the last few verses. "Thus the Lord blessed the latter years of Job's life more than the former. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Replaceable, easy, yeah. Where in the land were women as beautiful as Job's daughter to be found? You. Their father gave them estates together with their brothers. You again. Job lived 140 years to see 4 generations of sons and grandsons." So the rich get richer for no good reason? I'm not trying to be harsh here. I'm just saying, when you actually read these books, when you take away how good a pastor can make you feel, or someone who's a performance artist that can skewer all this, I can see where you can maybe go, I get rewarded for suffering. That sounds nice. But this is not what the text is implying. It's not what it said anyways. When I first read Job, the lesson I took away from it was just take a beating from God until he says it enough. Now when I reread it and revisit it and made this entire video on it, I actually see it has 2 lessons, one in the poetry and one in the actual original book. The answer for suffering in the poetry section is pretty clear. Don't question it, you little worm. And in the end of the original section, it's that God will put it, I guess, make the rich richer. You get double what you had. But here's an honest question. If you start this and you had nothing, if you get double what your reward, you're still going to have nothing. My name is Lane. This is Connection Lane. It's a place where I conduct interviews with different types of spiritualists and also do a lot of independent research. I've been going over monotheism for a long time now because I grew up with it. I was born into a Mennonite community and didn't stay in it. But obviously, what was all that about? What is all of any of this about? The more I dig into, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, I see how manufactured it is to make it work in the context of situations like politics and power dynamics. But I don't really see how this works on an individual level. I think there's plenty to read and decipher from the Bible, especially if it's your very first spiritual book. But I don't think it's the end road, and I don't think it should be treated as one. So that's all I have for right now. Did you guys learn anything from Job? Did I miss something? Do I need to revisit Job? Let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. If there's other books that you think I didn't cover so well, I'd be glad to, go on to those. Otherwise, I'm going to keep reading about my next project, which is going to involve, I don't want to spoil it. Well, I'll say one. Was it the Hyksos? You like the Hyksos? That's all I have for now. Bye-bye.